It was a Tuesday morning in late April, somewhere in the desert outside of Kandahar, Afghanistan, and the temperature was already climbing past 100 degrees, even though it was only 9 in the morning. Private First Class Jacob Thompson was 20 years old, had been in the army for 18 months, deployed to Afghanistan for 6 of those, and he was on his second patrol of the day in a region known for IEDs and ambushes. Jacob was from a small town in Tennessee, had enlisted right out of high school because college seemed too expensive and too uncertain, and the army offered structure, purpose, and a way to serve his country. He wasn't particularly religious. His family went to church on Sundays when he was growing up, a small Baptist church where everyone knew everyone. But Jacob had stopped going when he turned 16, said he didn't see the point, didn't feel like it made any difference in his life. He believed in God in a vague way, figured there was probably something out there, but he'd never felt any personal connection, never thought God was someone who actually intervened in human affairs, especially not in the middle of a war zone. That Tuesday morning, Jacob's squad was on foot patrol, checking a road that locals used to get to the market, making sure it was clear of IEDs before civilian traffic started. It was boring, tedious work, walking slowly, watching for disturbed dirt, looking for wires, anything that seemed out of place. Jacob was third in line, behind his squad leader Sergeant Martinez and another private named Davis, and they'd been walking for about 20 minutes when Martinez held up his hand for everyone to stop. "Something's not right," Martinez said quietly, and Jacob felt his stomach tighten. Because when Martinez said something wasn't right, you listened. Martinez had been deployed 3 times, had a 6th sense for danger, and he was studying the road ahead with narrowed eyes. "Thompson, check the left side. Davis, check right. I'm going to call this in." Jacob moved to the left edge of the road, scanning the ground, and that's when he saw it, a thin wire barely visible in the sand, running from the edge of the road into a small pile of rocks about 10 feet away. By the way, before I keep going, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening to this story from. "Sergeant, I got something," Jacob called out, and Martinez came over, looked where Jacob was pointing, and swore under his breath. "That's a command wire. Someone's watching us right now, about to blow this thing remotely." He got on the radio immediately. "Base, this is Alpha 2-3. We have eyes on an IED. Command wire detonation. Requesting EOD and backup. Over." The response came back crackling with static. "Alpha 2-3, roger. EOD is 40 minutes out. Recommend you hold position and mark the device." 40 minutes. Jacob felt sweat running down his back that had nothing to do with the heat. They were standing in the kill zone of an IED, and somewhere out there, probably in one of the buildings a few 100 meters away, someone had their finger on a trigger waiting for the right moment. Martinez was about to order everyone to pull back when it happened. The explosion was massive, not from the IED they'd spotted, but from another one they hadn't seen, buried in the road about 15 feet ahead of Martinez, and when it detonated, it was like the world ended. The blast wave hit Jacob like a freight train, picked him up and threw him backwards, and he felt heat and pressure and pain all at once, too much to process, too much to understand. Jacob hit the ground hard, his ears ringing so loud he couldn't hear anything else, and he tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. He opened his eyes and saw smoke and dust everywhere. Couldn't see his squad, couldn't see anything except grey and brown chaos. He tried to call out but couldn't hear his own voice, and then he looked down at himself, and his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. His uniform was shredded, burned, pieces of his gear were torn apart, but underneath his skin, his body, it was intact. Not just intact, but unmarked. No blood, no burns, no shrapnel wounds, nothing. He looked at his arms, and they were fine, looked at his legs, and they were fine, and that was impossible because he'd been maybe 20 feet from a blast that he knew, from training, should have killed him, or at least shredded him with shrapnel. He sat up slowly, his ears still ringing, and saw Martinez on the ground 15 feet away, not moving, and Davis was crawling toward cover, his leg bleeding badly. The rest of the squad was scattered, some down, some moving, and Jacob knew he should help them, but he couldn't understand why he was okay, why he wasn't hurt. He stood up on shaky legs and stumbled toward Martinez, and that's when the second explosion hit. Another IED they'd walked right past without seeing, and this one was even closer, maybe 10 feet from where Jacob was standing. He saw the flash, felt the concussion, felt debris and shrapnel flying past him, and he closed his eyes and braced for the impact, for the pain, for death. But it didn't come. He opened his eyes, and he was still standing, still untouched, and there were marks in the sand all around him where shrapnel had hit, pieces of metal embedded in the ground in a perfect circle around where he stood, but nothing had touched him. It was like there was an invisible barrier, a dome of protection, and everything that should have hit him had been deflected or stopped. Jacob looked at his hands, turned them over, and they were clean, no cuts, no burns, and he felt something then that he'd never felt in his entire life. A presence not physical but undeniable, like someone was standing right next to him, someone huge and powerful and protective. "God," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself, and in his mind, clear as if someone had spoken out loud, he heard a response. "I've got you, son. You're not done yet." Jacob's legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the blast zone, surrounded by smoke and chaos and the screams of wounded men. And he cried, not from fear, but from overwhelming gratitude, and the sudden understanding that God wasn't distant, wasn't uninvolved, wasn't uninterested in the life of one soldier in the middle of a war. He was here, right here, and he'd just saved Jacob's life in a way that defied every law of nature and warfare. The rest of the squad who could move started pulling back to cover, and someone, Jacob couldn't see who, grabbed him by the vest and dragged him behind a low wall. It was Davis, bleeding badly from his leg, but still fighting. "Thompson, are you hit? You okay?" Jacob looked at him and couldn't find words. I'm fine. I'm not hit." Davis stared at him. "What do you mean you're not hit? You were right there. You were standing in the middle of the second blast. I saw it hit you." "It didn't," Jacob said, and he showed Davis his arms, his body completely unmarked. Davis's eyes went wide. "That's not possible, man. I saw the shrapnel. I saw it hit you. You should be dead." "I know," Jacob said quietly, "but I'm not, because God protected me." The firefight continued for another 15 minutes, insurgents shooting from the buildings, the squad returning fire, and then helicopters arrived, gunships that cleared the area, and a medevac that landed to extract the wounded. Martinez was alive but unconscious, had taken shrapnel to the chest and leg. 2 other soldiers were wounded, one seriously. Jacob helped load them onto the helicopter, and the medic kept looking at him, kept checking him over. Couldn't understand why he was walking around fine with his uniform torn to shreds. "You sure you're not hurt? You're not in shock?" the medic asked. "I'm sure. I'm fine. God protected me." The medic gave him a look that said he thought Jacob was crazy, but he was too busy with the actual wounded to argue. Back at base, Jacob was debriefed by his commanding officer, Captain Williams, who listened to the report of the patrol, the IEDs, the casualties, and then looked at Jacob. "Thompson, Martinez says you were standing right on top of the second explosion, says he saw it detonate practically under your feet. But you're not wounded, not even scratched. Your gear is destroyed, but you're fine. Explain that to me." Jacob took a breath. "Sir, I can't explain it except to say that God protected me. I felt it. I was surrounded by something, and the shrapnel that should have hit me didn't." Captain Williams was quiet for a moment. "You know how that sounds, soldier." "Yes, sir, I know, but it's the truth, and I have witnesses. Davis saw it. The whole squad saw me standing in the blast zone untouched." Williams nodded slowly. I'm putting you in for a full medical evaluation. But Thompson, off the record, I've been in combat for 15 years. I've seen things I can't explain, and maybe, just maybe, you're one of those things. The medical evaluation found nothing wrong with Jacob. No injuries, no trauma, nothing except some bruising from hitting the ground. The doctors couldn't explain it, wrote it up as unexplained survival of blast event, and sent him back to duty. But the story spread through the base. Thompson walked through 2 IED blasts without a scratch, and soldiers started looking at him differently, some with awe, some with skepticism, some with something like reverence. Davis told everyone who'd listen, "I saw it with my own eyes. The blast hit him dead on, and nothing happened. It's like he had a force field." Jacob didn't encourage the attention, didn't like being treated like he was special, but he couldn't deny what had happened, couldn't pretend it was just luck or coincidence. He started going to the chapel on base, something he'd never done before, and he met with the chaplain, a major named Reverend Coleman, who listened to Jacob's story without interrupting. When Jacob finished, Coleman said, "Jacob, you've experienced something that most people never do. You've had a direct intervention from God, and that's going to change you. It should change you, because God doesn't save people just so they can go back to normal. He saves them for a purpose." Jacob asked what that purpose was, and Coleman said, "I don't know, but you're going to find out, and in the meantime, you need to figure out what you're going to do with this gift you've been given, this second chance at life." Jacob finished his deployment 4 months later, came home to Tennessee, and he was different in ways his family noticed immediately. His mom said he was quieter, more thoughtful, and he asked if he could go to church with them on Sunday. He told them what had happened in Afghanistan, about the IEDs, about being protected by what he could only describe as invisible armor, and his mom cried, and his dad, who'd been in Vietnam and never talked about it, looked at him for a long time, and finally said, "I believe you, son. I saw things over there too, things I couldn't explain, and I think God shows up in war in ways he doesn't show up other places, because that's where we need him most." Jacob enrolled in community college, studying to be a youth pastor, saying he wanted to work with kids who felt lost the way he had felt lost, wanted to tell them that God was real and active and involved in their lives even when they couldn't see it. He spoke at churches, at veteran events, at high schools, always telling the same story, always showing pictures of his shredded uniform that the army had let him keep, the holes and burns that should have corresponded to holes and burns in his body, but didn't. People would touch the uniform like it was sacred, like it was proof of something they'd always hoped was true. The soldiers from his squad stayed in touch, and 3 of them, including Davis, became Christians because of what they'd witnessed that day. Davis said in an interview years later, "I was an atheist before Afghanistan, believed in science and luck and nothing else, and then I watched my friend survive 2 explosions that should have vaporized him, and I had to reevaluate everything. Because there's no scientific explanation for what I saw, the only explanation is divine intervention." Martinez recovered from his wounds, medically retired from the army, and he reached out to Jacob a year after they got back. They met for coffee, and Martinez said, "I've been thinking about that day a lot, about what happened to you, and I need to know, do you really believe it was God?" Jacob nodded. "I don't just believe it, sir. I know it. I felt him there. I heard him speak to me." Martinez was quiet for a while, then said, "I grew up Catholic, stopped practicing when I joined the army, but after what I saw that day, after watching you walk out of that blast zone without a scratch, I started praying again, started going to Mass, because if God can do that, if he can wrap someone in invisible armor in the middle of a war zone, then he's real and he cares, and I want to know him." The military investigated the incident, not officially but quietly, because unexplained survivals make people nervous, make them ask questions about equipment and protocols. They examined Jacob's gear, the uniform and vest and helmet that were shredded, but had somehow allowed him to walk away untouched, and engineers couldn't explain the damage pattern. One analyst said in a confidential report, the distribution of shrapnel impacts on PFC Thompson's equipment suggests he was at the epicenter of both explosions, and the fact that he sustained no bodily injuries is statistically impossible. The odds are astronomical, approaching zero. There is no rational explanation based on known protective equipment capabilities. Today, 8 years later, Jacob is 28, married with a baby daughter, and he works as a youth pastor at a church in Knoxville. He still has the uniform, keeps it in a glass case in his office, and kids come in and stare at it and ask if it's real, and he tells them yes, and then he tells them the story. He's spoken at military bases, at veteran hospitals, at PTSD support groups, always with the same message. God is real. God is active. God protects his children in ways we can't understand or explain, and even in the darkest, most dangerous moments of your life, you're not alone. Jacob keeps in touch with the families of the soldiers who died in Afghanistan, goes to memorials, honors their sacrifice, and he says he doesn't know why he was spared when others weren't, doesn't claim to have all the answers, but he knows what he experienced, knows that something beyond human capability kept him alive that day. His daughter, who's 3 now, loves to hear the story, asks him to tell it at bedtime, and she always ends with the same question. Did God really give you armor, Daddy? And Jacob says, yes, baby, he did. Invisible armor that kept me safe so I could come home to be your daddy. Now, the chaplain who counseled Jacob in Afghanistan, Reverend Coleman, retired from the military and now travels speaking about faith in combat zones, and he always tells Jacob's story as one of the clearest examples he's seen of divine intervention. He says, I've ministered to thousands of soldiers in my career. I've heard countless stories of close calls and miraculous survivals, but what happened to Jacob Thompson stands out because it wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible, and there were multiple witnesses, and the physical evidence supports his account. The uniform doesn't lie. If you're listening to this story right now and you feel like you're in a war zone, not a literal battlefield but a metaphorical one, fighting battles with addiction, with depression, with circumstances that feel like they're trying to kill you, and you feel exposed, vulnerable, unprotected, I need you to hear what Jacob learned in that Afghan desert. God can wrap you in armor that no one can see, but everyone can witness the effects of. He can protect you from things that should destroy you. He can keep you standing when everything around you is exploding, and all you have to do is cry out to him. Say, God, I need you. I can't survive this alone. Please protect me, and watch what he does. He's still in the business of providing invisible armor, of shielding his children from harm, of proving that he's real and active and intimately involved in the details of our lives, even in war zones, even in the darkest places, especially in the darkest places. Don't wait until the explosion is coming. Call on him today, because he's already preparing your protection. He's already wrapping you in armor you can't see but will absolutely feel.